take some imagination to see into the future and understand its possibilities. But like Leonardo da Vinci, way before he could actually build any of the flying machines that he designed, understood that they were actually possible in principle. So you have to have both the education and the rationality as well as the imagination. I think another important component for most of our members, I don't think many of our members are motivated by fear of death, and I certainly not myself. I don't think death is literally nothing to be afraid of. What's bad about it is the end of life, which is the good stuff. So there may be some members who are actually afraid of death, but for the most part I think we like life and we want to see more of it. We want to explore the future, we want to maybe move out into space, we want to see what the future holds. So I think that's probably more primary motivation. I got interested in cryonics way back when I was about 18 or 19, and I was already interested in life extension before that. So before I stopped growing, I was interested in figuring out this problem of aging and death. And the reason is, it seems to me kind of ridiculous that we just accept aging and death as inevitabilities. They're really just engineering problems. And saying, well, my time has come, that's just ridiculous. We don't say that when we have heart disease or cancer, we treat it. And aging should be treatable and eventually will be. So my motivation is that I can't imagine getting everything done that I want to do in 80 or 90 years. There are so many skills I like to learn, experiences I like to have, people I like to meet, places I like to go. I'll just be getting warmed up by the time I'm 90, so I need to have a lot more life. One thing that's important to emphasize is that cryonics is not about immortality. It's not about offering immortal or eternal life. That's not really an option as far as I know. I don't think the universe allows that. I think eventually we'll run out of energy. It's an extremely long time in the future, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. But maybe in a few billion years we'll solve that problem. Maybe we can bud off new universes or something. I don't know. But I do eventually expect to die, and probably a lot before that, because probably by some accident or homicide or exploding sun or something will get me eventually. But my goal is to, as much as possible, make death a choice, make it voluntary. I may decide I've had enough after 5,000 years. I can't really imagine that, but that's possible. But I would like to make that choice rather than have it made for me. So we're really not talking about immortality. That word gets used all the time. It's just convenient, but it's not what we're offering. We're offering a chance to restart your life. Alcor's mission is, first of all and top priority, to keep our current patients cryopreserved. And then secondly, to cryopreserve people as needed. In other words, to give people a chance to overcome today's medical limits and take them to a future with more advanced technology where we have at least a shot of being able to revive them.
This is James Bedford. This is the first human who was cryopreserved. He was not cryopreserved by Alcor, he was cryopreserved by his family, but that was back in 1967. Actually, that's the way he looked when I first met him back in the 1970s, and fell in love with him. And I used this younger picture. It allows me to segue into the fact that rejuvenation is a part of what we intend to do with our members. Nobody wants to come back and be a 90-year-old person who has cancer again and still only has maybe a year to live or something. So that's my husband. This is his father, Fred Chamberlain Jr., who was Alcor's very first patient in 1976. And this is my mother, Arlene, who was cryopreserved in 1990. So these are my three family members right now. And I still have a son who is young and not cryopreserved yet, but he has made arrangements to be. This is our youngest patient to date. She is a little Thai girl that was almost 3 years old. This is a Chinese person, our very first Chinese patient. When we have Chinese folks come for a tour, they'll frequently recognize her picture. She was a famous author and publicist in China. And so all of these are members, and we have their pictures, so we think of them often, and we remember that that's why we're here.
People think it's kind of odd sometimes that Alcor is based here in Scottsdale, Arizona, where it's very hot, whereas we're dealing with extremely cold temperatures. The outside temperature doesn't affect our patients because they're inside vacuum insulated containers. But the one reason we're here is environmental. It's because this is a very stable region. We essentially get no earthquakes to speak of. We can feel some tremors coming from California. Nobody's ever died in an earthquake here. There are no tornadoes or typhoons. The worst we have is a bit of a dust storm occasionally. Scottsdale is actually a very supportive political environment for Alcor, which might surprise some people given that it's a conservative state. It's a good kind of conservative. It's kind of hands-off with regulation and is actually being quite supportive. They even boast of us being here as a kind of a technology leader. So we've had the mayor of Scottsdale open one of our conferences, the longest serving councilman open another conference. About 12 years or so ago, a piece of legislation came up that was not intended to cause us problems, but would have put us under the regulation of the cemetery board. And Michelle Reagan came to our support, and she's now the Secretary of State for Arizona. So we actually have pretty solid support here, and we have someone we keep on tap who keeps a finger on the pulse of what's going on, any potential legislation that could cause us trouble.
Is the number one issue preventing reincarnation?
Well, number one issue, gosh. Well, the only reason we can't bring somebody back today is because the technology to do that doesn't just exist. We can't undo the damage. First of all, whatever killed the person in today's sense, we have to better reverse that. So whether it's heart disease, cancer, or aging itself, we want to better reverse that. So that's going to be decades. And then there is some additional damage done in the process itself. There is a certain level of toxicity to the chemicals. That's a trade-off because we eliminate ice formation, which is a very good thing. So it's going to be a complex problem, and we can't exactly describe the technology that will be needed to solve that problem. It'd be kind of like asking someone in 1955, describe exactly how you're going to put someone on the moon. Well, they say, I don't know, we need big rockets, and that's about all they could say. But obviously, we'll solve those problems as we go along. As it is right now, today, 2018, people will think of cryonics as kind of an odd thing, especially if they don't really look into it. If they don't come visit Alcor, which they can do a public tour, then that seems more real. But I really believe that sometime in the not too distant future, cryopreserving people will be standard practice. And we'll look back on today and we'll kind of scratch our heads and think, what was wrong with those crazy people back then? They burned and buried their loved ones when they could have given a chance at more life. So I think this is one of those ideas that, like in vitro fertilization or open heart surgery, which initially were met with, oh my goodness, you can't do this is unnatural, this is horrible, and are now very well accepted. So I like to kind of put myself in the future looking backwards, and I think we'll look kind of silly that we're not doing this in far larger numbers today.
It's really wrong to take modern categories and impose them on ancient people and religious people too. It's best to take that context and bring it to the present. With most modern questions, it's difficult to say whether Jesus would or wouldn't do anything, and it's so what that really means is that ethics is important. Ethics from a Christian perspective or a religious perspective, and ethics from a human perspective. So every technology has its pros and cons, and so you have to weigh them of whether it's worth doing or not. Does the negative outweigh the positives in terms of benefits to humanity or not? I think if you had a pure science research going on about the effects of that and the possibilities of that, I think the answer would be yes. If there's a time where humans could really benefit from it, say for long-term space travel or whatever, that would be certainly a possibility.
I don't think religion should be any kind of problem for cryonics at all. With possible rare exceptions, like I think the Jehovah's Witnesses who don't allow blood transfusions, that will be a problem in our procedures. But apart from that, really what we're doing is simply an extension of emergency medicine. We're just taking over where today's medicine leaves off. So when the doctor declares you legally dead, they're basically saying that given today's level of technology, There's nothing more I can do for this person. And we're saying, let's take over, stabilize them, and give them a shot at taking advantage of future technology. So it's really no different in principle than someone who otherwise would have died who's getting a cancer treatment or heart surgery. They don't say, oh no, God is calling me, it's my time to go. They go get the surgery or they get the treatment. So it's really no different than that. It's just we're putting the person on pause for longer.
If our patient who's been a member for many years finds that they have a problem, they're going to be dying soon, we try to get them to come to Scottsdale to go into one of the hospice organizations that we work with. If they're in hospice here locally, we can move our equipment into the hospice room with them so that the moment they're pronounced as clinically dead, meaning their heart and lungs have stopped, we can immediately move them into an ice bath. This is a simulation here. These are just plastic ice cubes. They're covered with crushed ice. They're intubated so oxygen can be reintroduced for breathing. We have a mechanical heart-lung device here. It's called a Lucas. And so as quickly as possible, we have reestablished heart and lung function so that we've stopped or very much slowed down the dying process by reversing that for them.
We like to cryopreserve people as soon as we possibly can. Currently, where the law works, we cannot begin until the doctor declares legal death. Now that's kind of an arbitrary point because often they could actually revive the patient or resuscitate them temporarily. But that point we have to wait for, otherwise our procedures in stopping the heart temporarily will be considered homicide. But in a good case, we're right there at the bedside, and within seconds of that declaration, we can begin and start the cooling and the medications. That's not always possible. Sometimes the delay in getting to the patient, that's not necessarily critical if it's not too long and if the patient's not warm too long, but there are definitely limits, and the longer it takes us to get there, the worse the condition of the patient. In our procedures, the first thing we give is propofol because we want to prevent the patient from potentially coming back to some kind of level of awareness. Just because you've been declared dead doesn't mean that your brain has totally stopped functioning, and being plunged in a bath of ice would not be very comfortable. So we give propofol actually primarily to reduce metabolism, but also to prevent coming back to awareness. Now, if people didn't understand the cryonics context, if someone wasn't declared to be legally dead already, then we could, in principle, get in trouble with that. Now, we do hope to take advantage of some jurisdictions, such as in Oregon and Vermont and California and Canada now, where people can actually, if they're within the last 6 months of their life, can actually choose to end their own life. That's almost paradoxical, but what it means is that someone who had a terminal condition and wanted to be cryopreserved could actually plan the exact date. They could say, look, 2 weeks from today, next Tuesday, I want to go, and I want the team to be there ready. That actually would be a very good way to do this process.
So let me talk just a little bit about the difference between whole body and neural patients. It is a choice that our members make before they sign their contracts. Neuro means the cephalon, everything from about the clavicle up is saved. We don't remove the brain because the cephalon, the head, is a very good protector. If we were to take the brain out of the skull, we would then still have to protect it in some way. Whole body patient, for people who just don't relate to having their body removed and discarded, we can do whole body, but it's not as good as doing the brain. So we recommend the neuro. It's also less expensive for people who have financial considerations. It's $80,000 for the neuro, and it's $200,000 for the whole body. Okay, this is a plastic model of our cryocapsules. This is where our patients are. There is a very thick insulated lid on the top. They're not sealed in any way because liquid nitrogen boils off and the gas has to come out. So it's a lot of insulation here, but the top can be removed. Inside is how our patients are protected inside the liquid nitrogen. There are 4 whole body pods that fit around the exterior, and the whole body pods look like this. A whole body patient is inside this protective pod. First, we place them into a nice sleeping bag for physical protection against knocking against the side or something, and then they're put in this aluminum container for additional safety, and they're placed inside with liquid nitrogen. The neuro patients, in the middle, there is this column where our neuro patients, there's one patient per level there. So these cryocapsules can house 5 neuro patients and 4 whole body patients, or 9 patients inside one of these, and the liquid nitrogen is in the capsule with the patient. Now, we have been using this model of cryocapsule for 40 years. We have one of our engineers, our local genius, has come up with a new design for our cryocapsules, and you'll see one when we go inside the patient care bay. It also has a lid, but it's much smaller, that is insulated. And inside, you'll see that the design is different as to how the pods are laid out. And I think that you can get 9 of these pods. One of the pods can be divided for neuro patients. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, we have 9 pods in here. 8 of those would be for whole body patients, and 1 of them would be for up to 10 neuro patients. This design doesn't take up any more room on the floor because the feet or the rollers are not out here, they're underneath. So it really doesn't take up any more floor space, but it gives us 38% greater efficiency. And so we can get twice as many patients, only have to use half as much liquid nitrogen, and it's much more efficient. Okay, this is our patient care bay, and these are the cryocapsules. They're frequently called doers. That's the engineering term for the, actually, doer is the name of the individual who invented these. These are our older model, what we call the Bigfoot. You can see how the rollers are out on the outside. This is the capsule where my husband is currently being protected, and so I particularly like this one. I can also show you where my father-in-law and my mother are resting at the moment. Decades ago, we were worried that even though we don't have to worry about power outage, we were worried that what if we can't get liquid nitrogen for several weeks or something, what would happen? So traditionally, we've always had our patients head down, because if for some reason the liquid nitrogen should fall, maybe there is a failure in the equipment, or maybe we can't get a shipment of liquid nitrogen when we need it, we wanted to have their brain protected first and foremost. We have since had a lot of data collected and experiments done on these capsules, and we know that it takes about 6 months for the liquid nitrogen to fall all the way down to within a foot of the bottom. And we also know that the circulation of the nitrogen gas in the up and down in here really keeps the entire inside of these capsules within 1 or 2 degrees of minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit, even if the nitrogen has fallen dramatically. So our patients are very, very safe in these capsules. Most of these have a very shiny surface. These few capsules in here that have the dull surface, these were our very first capsules. Our first patients are in these. This is number 4. This is number 2. My father-in-law and my mother are both in this particular capsule. People often ask me, will I go into the same capsule that my husband is in? That's a very nice romantic idea, but we don't move our patients around for different reasons that exposes them to very hot, what we think of as air temperature, just room temperature. For them, it's very hot. So you basically go into a capsule depending on when you are cryopreserved. My mother and my father-in-law are both in the same capsule because between 1976, when my father-in-law was cryopreserved, and 1990, when my mother was cryopreserved, the rate at which we were placing people into cryopreservation was much slower, and so they both ended up in the same capsule. These days, some years we have had as many as 14 cryopreservations in 1 year. So you can see that it moves faster, and people will end up in separate containers. We have a patient care fund trust set up. Half of the money that a person spends to have this done, $80,000 for neuro, $200,000 for whole body, half of that goes into the patient care fund trust for making sure that they stay safe, that they always have liquid nitrogen. Two other purposes of the patient care trust are to pay for the reanimation, the revival of our patients, and to help them be rehabilitated, adjusted to a future life of some kind. So we want that fund to be very large. The more efficient we are in caring for them, the better that fund will fare. Right now, the agreement with the Patient Care Trust is that we cannot spend more than 2% of that fund in any 1 year, unless it's some kind of horrible disaster or something. But the Patient Care Trust has its own board of directors that are not the same as the Alcor board of directors, and 2/3 of the people on that board have to have family members in stasis. So they have, their motivation is first and foremost to look after the patients. So we've set it up that way. Right now, the Patient Care Fund is about $14 million and growing. So we hope it will do everything we want it to do. Over here, we have the office, if you will, or the place where our patients are taken down to liquid nitrogen temperature and then placed into one of these big dewars. The patient comes over and they'll be in a capsule like this with nitrogen gas, not liquid nitrogen yet. This is filled with liquid nitrogen gas, and the computer over there is once again controlling the descent, very, very gradually taking the temperature down from about minus 110 or so down to minus 320. Takes days. It's done very slowly so that the patient is stabilized all the way down. It's controlled by the computer. Every time, based on what the temperature is, it knows exactly how much gas. Every time you hear this thing going, shh, it's sending more gas into this one. We have a cool down taking place here. This is a pet. This is a cat. We do pets, but we only do them for our members. The way we look at it, if you're not a member of Alcor and you're not planning to be there for the pet when they're revived, what is the purpose? So we're not just a pet cemetery, but we will cryopreserve patients for our members. This is a member's cat who's being cryopreserved right now. Every time you see a little poof of nitrogen gas, it's adding, this is adding additional gas to this capsule to take that cat brain down to lower and lower temperatures. Once the patient has reached minus 320 degrees Fahrenheit, then they will be stabilized for a few days. We do take them out and do a CAT scan of their brain so that we can judge how well the brain was vitrified. And after that's been done, they're placed into a capsule for long-term storage for 50 to 100 years, or how long it takes.
Death is a complex concept, and people tend to have a very binary and false view of death. They think you're either alive or you're dead. In fact, our definition of death and criteria changes over time. Somebody who was declared dead in 1960 today would be routinely revived and resuscitated by CPR and defibrillation. And so it's our view that people who are today declared legally dead are actually really not dead. Almost everything in their body is alive, just some critical system has failed. So we don't really think someone is fully dead until they cannot, by any conceivable technology, be repaired in the future. So long as we stop them from getting worse, we put them in an unchanging state, we consider them not to be dead. Now, they're not alive because there's no metabolism, and people have a hard time, well, if they're not alive, they must be dead, surely. Well, no, there's kind of a third state. It's kind of like day and night, and there's twilight in between. So it's rather like being in a long-term coma, but with no metabolism. If we have the ability to control and reverse the aging process and revive cryopreserved patients, that opens up all kinds of possibilities for the future. I think some very intriguing possibilities. If you think of it, right now, it's kind of a ridiculous situation. You kind of learn, you gain knowledge in life, a little bit of wisdom, hopefully. Not all of us learn, but most of us gradually learn over time. So that's going up, but your vitality is going down at the same time. So that kind of sucks. What if you could have both going up at the same time? So you could be 200 years old and still as vital as you ever were. What kind of people would we be? I think we'd be very different kinds of people. We'd be far more mature. I think we'd have a lot more foresight. I don't see who's going to fight a war. I mean, usually it's 18 and 19-year-olds who go off and fight the wars. If you've been going around for 300 years, you're going to say, no thanks, let's negotiate. So I think we'll have a lot more foresight. I imagine quite a few of us will want to explore off this planet. That's certainly been a long-term interest of mine, partly because, I guess, like the old Europeans who came to America, they wanted to explore possibilities that weren't really possible where they came from. So it'd be interesting to go out into space and design new civilizations, try different ways of living. That's one thing I look forward to. But it's really hard to, concretely think about the future because we really just don't know what's going to be possible. We may have cyborg bodies, we may be uploaded. The number of possibilities is so enormous and impossible to really predict that it's just a big adventure, and we'll wait and see.